All right, good evening. I hope that everyone is doing well this evening or this morning, wherever you happen to be watching from right now. So currently, we are running a series from a trip that we took to Guadalcanal, talking about the Guadalcanal campaign that took place in the latter part of 1942 and early part of 1943. And one of the things that I probably haven't talked about before is anytime I do one of these trips, and there's obviously a lot of planning that goes into it, and usually my ambition outpaces what I'm actually able to do on these trips, and I usually end up getting about 75% of what's on my list. So same thing with Guadalcanal. Went to Guadalcanal and had a big long list, and just because of time constraints and things like that, there were some things that we weren't able to get to, but wanted to take a little bit of time to maybe address some of the gaps that are going to be in this Guadalcanal series. And one of those gaps is going to be from a place called Galloping Horse Ridge. And joining me this evening is going to be Dave Holland, who is, as you've seen in the series and on his channel and Facebook page, is the guy when it comes to Guadalcanal. So we're going to be kind of walking through some of the actions that happened around Galloping Horse Ridge, and also talking about an individual who was awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions there at the tail end of the Guadalcanal campaign. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in Dave right now. So here is Dave. Dave, you are the man when it comes to Guadalcanal. Appreciate you carving out some time to talk to us about Galloping Horse Ridge this evening.
I'm probably not the man, but I'm very honored and glad to have you on the show, JD, and it's good to meet you again.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the podcasts that I listen to that has really become one of my favorites, like top 5 as far as the stuff that I listen to, is the Unauthorized History of the Pacific War podcast. And I've noticed a little bit of a pattern as I've listened to a bunch of those episodes. Anytime Guadalcanal comes up, it's almost reactionary with the guys on that podcast. They'll say, "Oh, I wish Dave was here," so that we can ask him. So, yeah, for people who are watching and may not be familiar, Dave has a YouTube channel and Facebook page, Guadalcanal-Walking the Battlefield, which is just such an outstanding resource. If you've enjoyed the Guadalcanal series that we've had on History Underground, I mean, we're only skimming the surface. His content is where it's at to really get some depth and really kind of untie some knots and learn some things about the Guadalcanal campaign. I guess first, we haven't done a live chat before on here, have we?
No.
Maybe real quick.
I mean, you.
What's what give me a short background on like how you came to I guess be so connected with the history of the Guadalcanal campaign.
Yeah, good question. So when I was about 6 years old, my grandmother bought me a book. It wasn't a Guadalcanal book, it was a military history book. And that kind of set the stage for my planted the seed for my study of military history. So Guadalcanal always came up as one of the many campaigns, you study throughout, especially Pacific campaigns or just general World War II campaigns. And then when I went in the Marine Corps for 8 years, it really amplified my study of Guadalcanal because it was obviously a big Marine Corps battle. And then I went to embassy duty as a Marine embassy guard in Canberra, Australia. So as a result of that, I came back with a wife, which a lot of young single Marines do. And I went back to the States, got out of the Marines after a couple of years, then immigrated back to Australia. And I joined the police over here in the Australian Federal Police. And at the time, the federal police had a peacekeeping mission, operational mission in the Solomon Islands. So it was basically central out of Guadalcanal. That's the capital of the Solomon Islands, in Honiara. So I did multiple deployments there, starting from 2009 to 2012. So short stints, 4 months here, a month here, a month there. And that allowed me to get on the ground and kind of scratch the surface about the Guadalcanal campaign. And there I met a Australian patriot named John Ennis. Unfortunately, John's passed away now, but he was a gold mine. So some people probably know of John. He was the on the ground guy. He lived there for 20 years, an Australian. So good thing about John, a lot of these vets would come back and John would take them around. And in some cases, actually show them their same fighting position or foxhole, or they would show him that. So he gained a lot of that secondhand knowledge, and he passed a lot of it on to me. So in 2018 to 2020, I hit the ultimate research jackpot on Guadalcanal, but I became a police advisor to the Royal Solomon Island Police Force, still with the Australian Federal Police. So I was over there for 2 years, and work time, non-work time, anywhere I traveled, I was always on the battlefield. Mm-hmm. But it really allowed me to do that real deep dive, and it allowed me to walk the ground, study the ground. My resources and my military background and training. I mean, what was there in 1942 terrain-wise hadn't really changed, and you've seen it yourself from 2020. Well, it had changed. It's changed now, especially with all the garbage and stuff. But the actual terrain, like hills and valleys and streams, and where you'd put a machine gun in 1942, you'd still put a machine gun there today. If you were going to attack an area in 1942 by a certain route, you'd probably do the same today. So that allowed me to look at it. And also, I would look at the source material and the books that was already written and go, hold on a minute, this isn't entirely correct, what they're trying to say here. But it allowed me to do that deep dive. So, and then when I left in 2020, came back to Australia, I kept that interest up. And anything that came in Guadalcanal, I gathered the material, I spoke to people, I went on podcasts, spoke to veterans. So it's just snowballed from there.
Well, and like I said, you can do all the research and read all the books and everything. There's nothing that really replaces getting out and walking the ground. So like just preparing for our trip, I read 4 or 5 different books on Guadalcanal. But it wasn't until, getting there and getting your feet on the ground and like walking up some of those awful hills, that you really kind of get an appreciation for, the terrain and, just like what those guys had to endure, and also how the terrain and everything kind of informed their decisions and kind of funneled people in different places.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I just want to say one disclaimer.
Sure.
Especially for the comments I get. Now, what kind of accent does this guy have? Right. My best friend calls it the down under mixed down south. So I done growed up in North Alabama, but I can speak an Australian accent, Mike. Stuff like that, and it really flips people out. I try to slow down my speech, and so people can understand me. But I come from the part of the United States where TV shows are filmed for U.S. audiences, and they use closed caption. Because real backwards Alabama accent. So I don't apologize for. I don't have an accent. You have an accent. I don't. So I'll try to slow down so people can understand me.
I think
I realize that
has probably been the most frequent comment in this whole series is people saying, where is this guy from? The first time you were on Paul's channel, World War II TV, or the first one that I saw, I was sitting there listening to you and I thought, man, where's this guy from? It sounds like Mississippi, Alabama. And then you'd say Japanese. And I'm like, no, that ain't right.
I don't realize this is my 30th year in Australia, 30 years.
Oh, wow.
So I've actually been here longer than I lived in the States. Well, 8 years in the Marines. I spent 4.5 years overseas. So I really didn't spend that much after I left home at 18. Yeah. So it's a hybrid bastard accent. So anyway,
yeah.
Someone said roll tide. Yeah.
All right. So we got a little slide presentation here that we're going to kind of walk through this thing, and we're going to give a little bit of background. If you've watched the series, you probably have picked up, hopefully, some of the things with the Guadalcanal campaign starting in August of 1942. But one of the, I guess, groups of men who kind of gets left out sometimes in the Guadalcanal narrative is the Army. And the Army plays a huge role in the Guadalcanal campaign, especially at this place that we're going to be talking about with the Galloping Horse Ridge. All right, so Dave, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you kind of take it away here.
All right. You've got the controls. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So the U.S. Army, I think the best way to start this, I guess, talk is not to really go back to the 7th of August when the Marines landed, because we'll be here forever.
Sure.
And I'll bring it up to, in context, I'll bring it up to probably December to get ready for the January 43 attack, which involved the Galloping Horse campaign. So we mentioned the U.S. Army, and that's one of the biggest myths that I've come across on the Guadalcanal campaign is the mopping up myth. It seems to be the popular narrative is the 1st Marine Division landed, you fought the Battle of Alligator Creek, fought the Battle of Edson's Ridge or Bloody Ridge, played around a bit on the Guadalcanal River, and the Army came in to mop up. And that was about it. And the Marines left for a well-deserved break to go to Australia. Yes, but there's lots missing out there. Definitely wasn't a mopping up campaign. The only mopping up part was probably the last 2 weeks of the campaign. The poor 2nd Marine Division never even gets mentioned by most people, not even Marines.
Yeah.
I've come across. The 2nd Marine Division was there. And you hear things, the Army, Marines left and the Army was there. Well, hold on, yes. But there's a whole Marine Division of 15,000 guys, but they're just, not thought of. So this kind of brings in part of the myth busting, which we'll probably hopefully touch on today, talking about the hard fights here. So I have a book coming out later this year, should be in October in the U.S., and it focuses on the Guadalcanal, the Point Cruz area, in the fights there, the 7 major battles in that area. And especially in November, the U.S. Army and the Marines, the 8th Marines, was doing it very tough in November on the Point Cruz line. In fact, November was the most bloodiest month in the whole campaign. There was Army units that lost more men than some of the Marine units. People don't even realize that, but yeah, I go into a lot of detail on that. But I could talk for a couple of days on that. But I'll deviate back to the Galloping Horse. So, U.S. Army arrival. The first U.S. Army arrived in October the 13th. That was the 164th Infantry Regiment, National Guard. So they came in on October the 13th. That was the first reinforcements. Well, 7th Marines was the first reinforcement, but the first U.S. Army reinforcements the 1st Marine Division had. So they came in, big welcomed reinforcement, especially for the Battle of Henderson Field in October.
Mm-hmm.
They really tipped the scales, especially around the Coffin Corner area that we mentioned in your video. And then the rest of the Army started coming in. These guys were part of the Marical Division. That was the division that was formed in New Caledonia in the early 42 for mixed units from the independent regiments. They threw them all together. See, the 132nd Regiment, the 164th Regiment, and the 182nd Regiment, all National Guard units. And some independent artillery battalions thrown in there, and quartermasters and ordnance and medical, and all formed the division. And we'll talk about Major General Patch in a minute. So they were being drip fed into Guadalcanal, slowly but surely. So the next set of units arrived was the 182nd. There's 2 battalions of them. So I think if we go to, won't go to Patch yet. Before we do that, we'll just get an orientation of the Galloping Horse.
Yeah.
So we've got the Army units starting to arrive. The 1st Marine Division left on 9 of, so that's Australian, 9. I know what Alabama, 9. So left on the 9 December 1942. So that was the handover. So the first elements, the 5th Marine Regiment started leaving, and by the end of the month, the rest of the 1st Marine Division had left. And the Marical Division was coming in to replace them, slowly but surely. And so by about mid-December, the last regiment of the Marical had arrived. So there's a whole Marical division there. Plus, you still had two regiments of Marines there. The 8th Marines and the 2nd Marines were still there, plus the Cactus Air Force. Now, we'll put the orientation here. So you've got a map of Guadalcanal.
Yeah.
So the overall map. So we'll zoom it down a bit.
So here's the thing about Guadalcanal that I think it at least surprised me, and probably a lot of people don't know. You think Pacific Islands, you think little islands like Iwo Jima, Tarawa, and Peleliu. Guadalcanal is huge, and the battles during the Guadalcanal campaign actually occupy a small sliver of the island. So yeah, when we're talking Guadalcanal, like this, I mean, Dave, you can kind of correct me if I'm wrong here. I know towards the end it kind of spreads out a little bit, but this is pretty much our area of operations right here, isn't it?
Yeah, we even hold on, I'm trying to zoom in there.
It goes almost out to Taivu Point.
Yep, so that's Taivu Point. Even pull it in a little bit to the right. I mean, you could really say it's Alligator Creek.
Yeah.
To just Point Cruz, a little bit past Point Cruz. So about 15 miles area long on the coast. So Guadalcanal is 90 miles long and 30 miles wide. You know, you got 8,000 feet mountains in the middle and a big spine there in the middle. So the area was so small mainly because the whole fight was around that airfield at Henderson. So that's why it was so small. In fact, Major General Vandergrift, the division commander, 1st Marine Division, from minute one, he realized the fight was about the airfield.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the higher command, even Navy command, Army command, and Joint Chiefs of Staff, they were thinking about territory. So he was always getting pressured. Why haven't you taken the rest of the island? Why haven't you taken this part of the island? Why don't you expand? They haven't realized, because you got to remember, this is very early stages. They didn't realize at that stage how airfields are so important and to the Pacific campaign. So Vandergrift had to his, just shows how much of a genius he was, or I'd say tactical genius, or how much switched on he was. This guy on the ground. He realized that was the fight. To realize that airfield was number one. You protect that. That's all that matters.
Yeah.
You know, you could spread out. And Kelly Turner, they were always trying to fight with him. He was the amphibious force commander. He was always trying to piecemeal drop his men in, or drop the Marines in all over the island. I mean, he did at Eola Bay in November 42, but they said, no, put them here, put them in it, because we got to protect this perimeter.
Yeah.
That was, everything's about this perimeter. You know, the Japanese started doing that initially. That was some of the faults in the campaign. They dropped people piecemeal all over the place instead of concentrating. So I'm just trying to stay on track here. But yeah, so that's,
it's easy to look at a map of Guadalcanal that was ripped out of an old National Geographic magazine and say, why haven't you occupied more area? Man, when you get there, I mean, it is some of the most rugged country that you can possibly imagine.
So yeah, you narrowed it down a bit. So
yeah,
it's a very unique map you got here, JD. I meant to speak to you about that. It's quite where'd you get this map?
I got this, I think, from maybe the Australian archives.
Oh, okay.
Maybe. Yeah, I think that's where I got to go back and look at that.
It was good. It was some different spelling, but yeah, it was some of the, it was, in fact, it goes back to some of the native spelling of it, which is pretty good. And some of the, like the Lunga River is not there. It's named after the native. But yeah, you'll see there, you have the airport, and actually shows the 3 airfields at the time in January 1943 where they were at. And even Coley Point too, that was there in January. So there's 4 airfields. So viewers probably can't see, but where it says Lunga Point and Airfield, you got Henderson in the middle. On the left-hand side's Fighter 2, which is actually called, other name was Cookham Airfield. And then you had Fighter 1, which is called obviously a fighter field. And you had Coley Point, which is about 4 miles to the east there. And that was a bomber field. And then 13th Air Force really operated out of there, big 24s. So that was it. And then, yeah, where that arrow is kind of Cochabamba and Point Cruz. So that's kind of the area.
Yeah, so the arrow that I put in there was to kind of signify around about where Galloping Horse Ridge is.
Okay.
The area that that we're hitting.
Yeah, okay.
Real quick question. Again, I don't want to get us too bogged down.
That's all right.
But the questions come up. What about civilians? Were they evacuated or relocated during the battle?
Yeah, it's a good question. 11,000 square mile island had about 9,000 natives on it pre-war. They're mainly located on the coast around the rivers. That's where they built their villages. So you'll see the little villages there, and this is actually kind of a pre-war map, even though the airfields are there. It depicts the pre-war villages. Mm-hmm. But they scattered. In fact, the Matanical village, day one on August the 7th, as soon as they seen the U.S. Navy planes flying over, I think they dropped one bomb close to them, and they literally head for the hills. And if you remember, JD, when we went to the village in Barana on top there, where Hill 27 is in the Gifu,
yeah,
that's their, I guess, their ancestors lived at the village, and that's where they immigrated below there in the Matanical Forks, and then a few years later they come up and built the village up top, but they never returned. So basically, some of the men stayed, but then they hid the women and the children. And they scattered and went up to the mountains and in caves and things, and were there. The Japanese, just like everywhere else, they sometimes didn't treat the locals very nice. 3 things you don't mess with a Solomon Islander, I learned. I don't know if it's in this order, but I was taught their gardens, their pigs, and their women. And that's to this day, you do not mess with them. And the Japanese did all 3. So yeah, they went off, turned them offside very quickly. So yeah, that's what's happened to the civilians. And they come back, and they did actually help. We'll talk about some of the porters a bit later, and about how they assisted the Allied effort, especially with the famous Coast Watchers and Scouts, and the famous Scouts that was adopted by the Division Intelligence with Martin Clemens, the Coast Watcher, and his small team of, I wouldn't say small, there's about 75 scouts, the guys that carried the rifles. It went out behind lines, and pretty tough customers like Jacob Vuza, Daniel Poita, and a few other guys. Yep, so it's more orientation. So we're starting to bring it down. So this is obviously a Google Earth map. So it just shows you roughly where things are, and you can start to see the terrain here. So the coastal bits is flat. And at the time of the battle, it was no villages there. Now it's Honiara, the capital city. The Americans built the base there in 43, 44, big logistical training base. And after the war, it became Honiara. But pre-war, that was some coconut plantations, a small village at the mouth of Matanical, a small village at Cocombona, and it was just all flat coastal land. And then you started getting into the ridges, then it started moving up into the mountains. Now, the thing about Guadalcanal, you'll see, and once we show the other photos, how barren the hills are. Mm-hmm. That's not from people cutting it, that's natural. And someone explained to me, the geologist, and we always say it's just coral, which it is coral, and they called it coral. And we got a photo of a coral foxhole. And the top, there's not much topsoil there, so it doesn't grow trees. It grows this kunai grass, which is about 6 foot high, kunai grass. And JD, you get in the middle of that, it's like a little oven.
Yeah.
And then the jungle, so the ridges were barren with that kunai grass, and then below in the ravines is thick jungle, where the streams were. So that's how it went. And that's how it is. If you see it now, you go, oh, it's been cleared since the war. No, it's just roughly how it is. And when we show the battlefield of the Galloping Horse, that's what you see is exactly how it was in 1942. So yep, just it showed it. So you got Galloping Horse to the left, and we'll talk about Seahorse in a minute, and the Gifu, and I'll mention that a bit later what these are. But this is more of an orientation
and then just as another reference point for people who have been watching the series, there at the top where you see that little notch coming out is Point Cruz, where Monroe was killed.
The Matanical's to the right of the river.
Yes. All right.
So yeah, this is a drone shot my friend took. So this is, I don't know if the viewers can see the little yellow writing I've done on it, but you got Matanical River. It looks cleaner there than what you've posted, JD. Remember when we visited?
Yeah, I was kind of, this kind of makes me sad seeing how nice it looked at one point.
Yeah, well, you can notice there's probably a bit of flood there. It washed all that junk out
Yeah.
somewhere else, unfortunately. So yes, you had Matanical. Left-hand side is east, right-hand side is west. There's a Getchie Patrol area for some of you guys who've watched that great episode, the Getchie Patrol. I'll just throw that in there to show what it was. Then you start to look up top. You got the Gifu and Mount Austin, top left. Then you go over. You got the Seahorse and the Galloping Horse, and the Hill 55 in a few areas. But we'll show in a minute. It gets a little more better for you a little more better. See, that's Alabama grammar.
One thing that I found hilarious is that in the planning for this whole operation, like Mount Austin, the Gifu, they called the Grassy Knoll. And it's big dadgum mountain.
Yeah, it ain't no. All right, so what we'll do now, we'll talk about this fella here. You go, who is this guy? Who's he look like, JD?
I know who he is.
Yeah.
Is he supposed to? Is there somebody that he resembles, or
I don't know? Does he resemble someone? I know who he is too, but he just some off the top of my head. Maybe somebody will comment they think he resembles. So I said, "Oh, my grandfather." Yeah, it could be. So this guy here is Major General Alexander Patch. Almost said Vandergriff because we got Alexander in my head. Alexander Patch. Now, Alexander Patch was the division commander of the Marical Division, the division I mentioned earlier. That was formed in New Caledonia in early 42. He was sent out in early 42 to take command of all the U.S. forces in New Caledonia because at the time, the biggest threat was the Japanese going down to Samoa, Fiji, in that area to try to cut the supply line off. I hate to say cut the supply line, but severely interdict the supply line from Australia to America. So, and they started garrisoning these islands. So, and he was the garrison commander. So once he had enough units there, they formed this division. Excuse me. So he arrived on, all this off the top of my head, November the 16th. He arrived at the time there was the 5th Battle of Matanical was fighting at the time, but we won't get into that. But he arrived and took over command of the division. There was a guy called Brigadier General Edwin Seabury. He had command up to that stage. But Patch arrived and took over. So Patch was a career Army officer, World War I, or as they call it in Australia, Great War vet, and served probably did all the command staff colleges, war colleges, and things that these guys normally did. So he's a very good guy, very good commander. He later became Army commander in Europe, Corps commander and Army commander in Europe. So that's how some people might recognize his name, General Patch. So Patch came in, he took over overall command. Transition of the command on 9 December from Major General Vandergrift. So at that stage, the Americans was basically spent. The Japanese was spent offensively. They didn't have much gas left in their tanks. Both sides are waiting for additional reinforcements it's almost like waiting for it's like the night shift at an emergency incident, waiting for the morning shift to come over. We want to hand this over for we got fresh troops coming. So that's how it was. So there's like two boxers in the ring, both sitting in their corners. They're both offensively spent. So Major General Harmon was the South Pacific Army commander. So he came in and he's the one that appointed Patch. They said, look, this is what we're going to do. Your orders are simple. You're going to clear the Guadalcanal of Japanese. That was a nice, simple order. You're going to clear them out. So they had an offensive plan for January. At the time, they had the Marical Division with the regiments were pretty much spent. He had one fresh regiment, the 132nd, had just arrived, right? And just put them in the corner, and we'll get back to these guys in a second. So, and then the 8th Marines were there, 2nd Marines were there. The other two regiments of the Marical was pretty much spent, So they've had he said, look, I need 5 divisions to clear this place out. I need 2 to hold the airfield and 3 more to clear it out. So they didn't have divisions at the time to do that. But they had 1 division. Well, they had the 43rd Division, I think, in Fiji, and they weren't going to release those guys. They had the other 2 divisions, I think the 41st and the 32nd. Well, the 32nd was definitely fighting in New Guinea, the twin campaign that's going on at the same time as Guadalcanal. So they fight in Iwo and Papa in New Guinea, in Buni and Gon in that area. So they had a 25th Division, right? And they were a regular division in Hawaii. They were going to be shipped down to New Caledonia and onto Australia to join MacArthur in the Southwest Pacific to join him, with him. But I think it was Nimitz and Harmon got together and says, no, the only way we're going to clear Guadalcanal is get some fresh guys in there. We're going to use the 25th Division, this regular Army unit. So they landed in New Caledonia, and we'll talk about the division commander in a minute. I think they basically told him, they said, look, Halsey was the South Pacific overall commander at the time, Admiral Halsey, said, look, glad you're here. I know you're not packed combat-wise, but I spoke to Harmon. We're going to send you guys in to relieve the 1st Marine Division. You're going to go in, officially, you're going to go in and help out Patch. So they shipped them out, and the first unit started landing 17th of December. Trying to think off the top of my head, I think it was the 35th Regiment. Anyway, they landed, and throughout the month of December and the first week of February, the 25th Division was there. Very important point here, and it affected the Americans and the Japanese. They intended to use the 25th Division right off the bat. You know, they were Green Division, even though they're trained regular old Army. Because the thing is with Guadalcanal, especially those tropical islands, if you leave a unit there for 1-2 weeks, every week you're there, your unit cohesion starts to deteriorate, your effectiveness starts to deteriorate with the heat, then the sickness starts to come in. So you're not as effective. So they wanted these guys to get there, and then within a week or two, put them straight into the offensive. So they'll have the energy, you know, they wouldn't be sick to climb these big hills, to carry these packs, to push through the assault. So it's very, very important that a lot of people that study the Guadalcanal campaign or they fighting in the tropics don't really realize.
So
that's you got to use these guys because it
yeah,
sucks your strength and you're there for 2 days.
Oh, I can speak to that. So getting ready for this trip, like I was really pushing myself, you know, training, because the original plan was to go up Galloping Horse Ridge, which I think you referred to as a death march. So, I mean, I was doing a 5K 3 or 4 times a week and lifting. And then I was doing, you know, like going on hikes with a rucksack of an evening and stuff like that. Midwest, you know, is in the 90s, and I'm looking the temperature for Guadalcanal, and it's supposed to be like 95 degrees Fahrenheit. I was like, okay, it's humid here. You know, it'll be a little bit rough there. There was nothing that could prepare me for that. I mean, it was those first few days. It took me kind of like how you have to acclimate to altitude when you go up into the mountains. Like it kind of took me a couple days to acclimate to the heat and humidity. It is different. I'd been in Death Valley where it was 116 degrees Fahrenheit over the summer, and there was nothing that touched the the heat in Guadalcanal.
Yeah, so it's very, very humid. But what's another thing about Guadalcanal? It's not that far off the equator. As you know, in 30 minutes, your sun will bake you and fry you. The only equivalent place I've been many jungles and places around the world. Panama, to me, it reminds me of Panama because Panama is almost on the equator, and in that humidity, it reminded me a bit of Panama. And you'd get beet red within 30 minutes, and that sun is. And this is a good segue, because when we start talking about on those barren ridges of Galloping Horse, how that really affected that unit there, and it's a good study in how that will affect it. So
yeah.
It's a different place. We'll keep driving on. I'm trying not to get side railed. And so the American situation. I'll go back to Patchett a second.
Sure,
you would, if you don't mind. So the American situation at the time, Patchett came there. The 25th was coming in, and the Americans had finally worked out their supply, and they were getting some good supply coming in, a good uninterrupted supply line, because they were having before a lot of issues in New Caledonia. They had a lot of supply, but they didn't really have the facilities and infrastructure to unload it off the ships. And then once it reached Guadalcanal, there was no really major docks to unload it, to get it effectively to the guys. And then they were using combat troops to unload, which if you've ever been in an infantry unit or a combat unit, like, you don't want to unload boxes, working parties. You definitely don't want to do that. So they were getting having issues with that. And some of the commanders go, I don't want to release my people. So they'd starting to work that out by that stage. A lot of supplies started coming in. The Cactus Air Force was the Air Force. It was a conglomerate of Army, Marine, and Navy planes, and they're really starting to beef up then. So the Cactus Air Force was there in full power. So things were looking good for the Americans. By the first week in January, the 2nd Marine Division, last regiment, the 6th Marines, and their headquarters unit had arrived. So they're there as a full division. So the first week, by the 7th of January, Patch had the Maricao Division, the 25th Division, and the 2nd Marine Division. Right? They were going to kick off their assault. So the way that it stood there on, say, on the 1st of January, a place called the Gifu, and the Gifu was on top of Mount Austin. And Patch had underestimated the Japanese there. He only thought it was probably a reinforced company. So his 132nd Regiment he was going to use for his January offensive. He goes, oh, well, these guys, I'll just send them up there. I'll send a battalion up there to clear them out because I don't want my left flank basically pressured. I want to clear out my left flank because when I do my final offensive, it's going to be straight down the coast. And I don't want to have that, Japanese on my left flank. Plus also too, at that time, the Japanese would coming down and infiltrating and blowing up airplanes, especially on Fighter II. So he goes, I'll just clear that out. Oh, the 132nd, they've landed. They need to be blooded a bit. Let's just send them up there. Well, they sent them up there, the first 1 battalion. So they went up there. They got caught in a bit of a hornet's nest. Battalion commander, Colonel Wright, died. Sent another battalion up, tried to flank it. Then they found out that they were opposed one of the most strongest Japanese defensive positions on the island. You had roughly about 500 Japanese dug in on a 1,500-yard horseshoe-shaped, mutually supported with bunkers and pillboxes, dug in ready in that thick jungle. So the 132nd spent most of about 6 weeks just containing that area. So they were spent. So his 132nd, they no longer fought in the rest of the campaign. They were out. They went back and guarded the airfield after they were relieved by the 25th. So that was the situation there. The Point Cruz line had been there since late November. And that basically resembled a World War I battlefield, a Great War battlefield. So within 50, 60 yards apart, you had both sides on 2 ridges. So you had the 2nd Marine Division, or the 8th Marines, and the 164th Infantry Regiment facing the Japanese for 6 weeks at Point Cruz. Mm. So that was where that line was. So what Patch had intended to do, so probably, we'll talk about the Japanese situation before we get into the next, probably what he wanted to do. So This guy here, I promise I wouldn't comment about his ears. Don't laugh, JD. It's not nice. This is Hayataki, Lieutenant General Hayataki. He was the Japanese overall commander. A lot of people don't know about him. They think, I've actually heard people say Ichiki that's the only name they hear. Ichiki was only a colonel of a regiment. Well, they say Murayama, which is the 2nd Division commander, which is another popular, or Kawaguchi, which was the 35th Brigade commander, Major General Kawaguchi. But this guy here, a lot of people don't know about him. Lieutenant General Hayataki, the 17th Army commander. And in early October, he landed on the island, took direct command of the fight. It was very interesting situation he was in. So he ran the New Guinea campaign and the Guadalcanal campaign from a gully, New Cochabamba, in a makeshift hut. And most times underneath the big tree for avoiding bombs. So it's strange. Yeah. So it wasn't until late November, early December, then the Japanese formed 2 armies with a separate army in New Guinea with the overall Imamura. I can't speak Japanese, but Imamura was in charge of that. He was a Japanese army at that time was about the roughly equivalent of a Western corps. So if you read Japanese army, it's about a corps. Okay. Japanese area army is about an equivalent of an army. So just take one notch down. So anyway, Hayataki was on the ground. He was the overall guy. He wasn't a great commander. He was a signals officer or communication officer, and he had some limited experience. in China, but he really wasn't a combat commander. But he wasn't silly and stupid. And some people think, oh, the Japanese, they just did mass banzai attacks and they didn't really think tactically and strategically, or tactically and operationally. But I found out they're very switched on tactically and operational. It's amazing how people say, oh, in the first 6 months they were like, jungle blitzkrieg, which is a silly term, but how good they were, and they infiltrated and fill it in attacks and how good they were. But all of a sudden, after 6 months, they were just totally hopeless. They just don't lose that. But that's another subject. We can talk about Japanese infiltration techniques. But anyway, at that time, late December, early January, the Japanese, their supply line was basically cut off. They were getting limited supplies in by the Tokyo Express destroyer runs, but not much at all. They tried to do a submarine resupply, but that didn't really work out with barrels. They'd float the barrels in, would fill with supplies. That didn't really work out to their advantage. So they were struggling big time. And then disease and malaria kicked in. I remember a Marine officer writing, he goes, look, we were hungry on Guadalcanal, but we were not starving. And the Japanese, they were starving.
Yeah.
And they were starving to death. And they were dying of the diseases. Roughly about 21,000 Japanese soldiers that died on land, died on land of Guadalcanal. 9,000 have been attributed to disease and starvation. 11,000 combat deaths. So that was a situation they were faced with. This is an important point until I really started deep diving studying the campaign. And this goes up to the mopping up myth. In November, there was at least 25,000 Japanese still on the island. They were well organized, they were dug in, and they were determined to fight. And most important point, in their minds, they were waiting for reinforcements. They were going to kick off the fourth largest offensive again. And when this time is going to be a lot larger, they're going to kick it off. They weren't going to give up. They were just waiting for reinforcements to recommence their offensive operations to kick the Americans off. That's in their mind. Hayataki had thought that. Now, 31 December is a key day because the Imperial General Headquarters, Japanese, at that stage had basically said, after big meetings with all the heads, the Navy and the Army, look, we need to evacuate Guadalcanal. There's no way we can keep this up and supply them. There's no way we can do it. So they went to the Emperor to get his permission. And on the 31st of December, the Emperor gave his okay to evacuate Guadalcanal. In fact, it was the first time in any official military documents the Japanese had mentioned the word defend.
Oh,
defend
wow.
anything. Well, one source I said in their history, but definitely in World War II. But this is a very key point here. Hayataki, Lieutenant General, no one got the word to him. In his mind, he was still waiting for the 51st Division to come in. He didn't get the word until they sent two staff officers from Rabaul. They personally went in with a letter, and that was the 15th and 16th of January, to tell him you're going to evacuate. So he had to go away for a few hours and go, no, I'm not playing this game. This is bullshit. Oh, sorry. My Australian, that's Australian, by the way. So he wasn't going to evacuate because he's actually telling his guys before, and he did a real impassionate speech. He goes, it's easy to die in a glorious charge, but it's harder to suffer every day or wait patiently and suffer every day.
Yeah. And then to have to go back to those guys and tell them that their suffering has been in vain.
No, he didn't do that. What they did tell those guys is, look, we're going to evacuate because we can't hold the front line. We're going to evacuate to the northeast tip, Camp Esperance, because that's where reinforcements are coming in. You got to remember, the Americans thought that big convoy, so we're getting real off track now. I'm trying to get back in. The big convoy coming in February was a big reinforcement convoy. That's what Halsey thought. They were coming in for the next attack. It was like the Gallipoli campaign. The successful part of the Japanese on Guadalcanal was evacuation. That really fooled the Americans on that.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll get back to that's how the Japanese was overall. So they're waiting for reinforcements. They dug in. They're suffering. So the Americans' plan. So here's a map made by 35th Regiment Engineers. So Henderson Field's to the top right.
Mm-hmm.
So I mentioned Mount Austin had been contained. So the plan was for the 35th Regiment, which is a regiment of the 25th, fresh regiment, to come in to relieve the 132nd Regiment there in Mount Austin with a battalion and some of their anti-tank company guys and some more units.
And this is around the Gifu.
Around the Gifu.
Yeah.
Yep. 2 battalions of the 35th was going to do a flank. Was that like loopy arrow
Mm-hmm.
there? They were going to flank and take out the Seahorse, which is 43 and 44 there. The 27th Regiment, which is the second arrow down from the top, was going to attack west of the Guadalcanal over a series of ridges. They named these ridges the Galloping Horse, and they named it from the Galloping Horse, we'll see in a minute, is from a 12,000 foot view or a topographical map. If you flip it upside down, it looks like a horse galloping, and the seahorse looks like a seahorse. If you don't believe me, have a look.
Yeah.
You think, well, it kind of looks like one. It isn't one you got to like squint, but you can really see it. And their objective was to go in and cut off the supply line to the Gifu, because Gifu, and I remember, and I think I showed you where the supply line had a small supply line.
Yes.
That went down the ravine and up, and they were getting limited amounts of resupplies. So what Patch wanted to do was cut their supply off and isolate the Gifu. Once that Gifu, that area, named the Gifu because some of the Japanese troops were from the Gifu area of Japan. Once they isolated the Gifu, then they can reduce it. So he thought, well, we're not going to reduce it, wait until it's reduced, then continue my grand assault down the coast. We'll just keep that unit there, reduce it, and we'll just push down the coast because they're no threat. So once the 27th Regiment had secured that left part of the Guadalcanal, the west, then the 2nd Marine Division, which is the first arrow, was going to push down the coast. Well, they were pushing down the coast. The 25th then was going to do an envelopment around the hills and come to a place called Cocombona. They were going to trap the Japanese because the majority of Japanese were between Point Cruz and Cocombona. A lot of the guys, they were going to trap them and destroy them there. Once they destroyed them at Cocombona, then we were going to advance down the coast, 1 regiment, because remember, they were still thinking the Japanese would come in with a massive assault and they weren't going to leave the airfield vulnerable. That's why the Marical Division the whole division was around the airfield, guarding the airfield. Then they were going to advance down the coast, and when they get close to the coast, they're going to land another battalion of army on the other flank and then come in and destroy them. That was the Americans' grand plan. But first, they had to isolate the Gifu by taking those ridges of the Galloping Horse and the Seahorse. So that sets up attack date of 10 January. So have we got to Collins yet? No.
No, I think he's coming up here in a second.
Okay, we'll stay here. So this is from Hill 27. So the Americans were on Hill 27. So Hill 27 was the north end of the Gifu. So this is part of the isolation. The Americans had taken this hill. This is kind of closed the back door to the Japanese. So if you're looking from Hill 27, so if you're facing west, this is what you see. And you got Savo to the right, Cape Esperance with the northeast corner of Guadalcanal to the left. Thin red line or Galloping Horse. And they didn't call it Thin Red Line at the time. That came later. We'll probably mention that. But that's Galloping Horse Ridges. The one before that, the Baron, is the Seahorse in the hills. So that was, once they isolate those 2 areas, or once they took those 2 areas, it would isolate the Japanese here at Gifu. Yep. That just shows you the Galloping Horse Ridges. And you can see this is a good indication. See how steep that ridge is.
Yeah.
And the Guadalcanal is at the bottom right. And it's honestly straight up and down. So Japanese had a good position up there. You really couldn't flank them from that side. And literally that is straight down. I mean,
wow.
Yeah.
Crazy.
All right, this fellow here with his swagger stick, that's Major General J. Lawton Collins. So my grandfather fought in the 7th Corps U.S. Army in Europe. This was his corps commander in Europe. And I remember when I was growing up, my grandfather always talked good about this fellow. He goes, "Oh, he's a good commander, good guy." And my grandfather was fought under him. But that's how I first knew Alabama English again. First known Collins. So Collins was a regular Army guy, very switched on. To me, if he would have stayed in the Pacific, I still rate him as one of the highest U.S. Army division generals in the Pacific. He really trained these 25th guys pretty good. 25th Infantry guys pretty good. He very hands-on general. He I remember one story that he was on the front line in Guadalcanal, and they were trying to work out a machine gun. And he said, "Look, let me have a go." And he actually sat down and started working on a machine gun and fired a few rounds. And he actually brought people around and gave them a bit of a lesson on these heavy machine gun that they'd come across. And they're all watching him, and he was shooting at some guys in trees and stuff. It just little things like that. Anyway, this was 17th of December. Yep.
At this point, he was the youngest. Wasn't he the youngest general in the U.S. Army at this point?
I would say so. I don't know if Gavin, Jumping Jim Gavin, I don't know if he was a general yet. I think Jumping Jim Gavin was like 34, 36 maybe.
Okay.
But yeah, I know he was at the time in 42, in December 42.
Okay. I know that when he becomes Corps commander with the 7th Corps, he's the youngest Corps commander in the Army. I think he's like 46 or 47 or something like that at the time.
Even though my grandfather loved him, being a former Marine. Yes, I say former ex, doesn't really bother me. Because anyone who says that to me, it's not a disrespect, but some people get all wrapped up about that. He tried to get rid of the Marine Corps, in 46 or 47 when he was the chief of staff of the Army. So that was a big friction there.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
That's another story in itself. So this is 17th of December, 42. The first elements of the 25th Division are landing. So that's it. I think he arrived a few days before to get a brief up and things like that. But here he is meeting his guys on the beach. So he doesn't have a helmet on. Now this is a photo taken in New Britain. So this is a good photo because I don't think you even knew JD to go on the left, and we'll talk about later.
Yeah.
At that place is Major Charles Davis.
Yeah.
Davis is squatting down. And I think he was battalion commander by that stage. I'm pretty sure he was. And he's squatting down with his M1 talking to Collins there in the jungles of New Britain.
Yeah, I've always loved this photo. That's why I had to put it in.
Yeah, it's a good photo. And after this, he left and went to Europe to go to England, I think. Yeah, cool. All right, so now supplies. This brings up the point about supplies. Now, the Americans had an issue of moving the supplies to the front line, especially in these hills here. Most of the supplies that Americans did on the coast, they had some roads built by that stage. They've been there for 6 weeks, and they could get some supplies to the guys with Jeep, mainly by Jeep, even though the bulldozers would cut the roads up the hills. As you know, JD, a good rain there, it just turns into just a big mud puddle.
Yeah.
It's hard. But for these hills here, they didn't have any roads except for this one little Jeep track, and it's still here to this day. I took this photo. This is Hill 55. It's looking north. So the Marines, the 1st Battalion, and 2nd Marines had control of this hill, right? So this is the front line. They had control of this hill. They'd built a road up, a Jeep road, and you can see remnants of it there. You can see the little line cut in the So
is that the mouth of the Guadalcanal that we're looking at in the background?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's Hill 55 and Hill 66 on the other side, and Guadalcanal straight at 12 o'clock.
Okay.
And that's Iron Bottom Sound and Florida Isles and Tulagi is across there. So they had one Jeep trail. So to bring stuff up, they had to drive Jeeps up there. So, and from there, they had to hand carry everything. So I think next photo we got some hand carry. And they had, they called the push-a-maroo, which I thought was quite funny. So when the 25th Division got there, they come up with some very innovative techniques. They're a very switched-on unit. They come up with pulley systems up and down the ridges, from the bottom to the top to get supplies, and especially wounded up and down, or mainly up. They come up with a push-a-maroo. So the Japanese transport ships are called maroos. So they said, we'll call it the push-a-maroo. So you got to push it up the river, the push-a-maroo. So that was the nickname that they gave these. So this is one way they'd put these rubber or collapsible boats, engineer boats, that would take these up the river and bring wounded out and supplies in. But once again, we're talking about whole division to supply. So, and once again, it gets down to this. So, JD, you carried a camera up and down the hill, and it killed you. And I mean, I've been there on operational jobs and things like that, and and carrying heavy loads and packs and bodies. We brought bodies up and down, but that'd kick your butt.
Oh,
anyone that says how fit you are, okay, maybe Olympians need to train there. Do that.
Yeah.
Water, jerry cans in a box up and down those hills. You'll be a very strong person. You'll be dead, probably dead.
Yeah, I had my backpack with a drone in it and carrying my camera. So I was on my backpack, I'm guessing maybe 15 pounds. Well, and I was carrying my water, and it just was kicking my butt, especially those first few days.
Yeah, it's hard to describe. So I think the next one's the porters, Solomon Island porters. Yeah, so they had 75 porters for this operation, and the division, or sorry, the 27th regiments. We're on 27th regiment attack. They had their anti-tank guys, because obviously they couldn't take their anti-tank guns up. They were the ones escorting these guys. Not too bad, but things about these are only porters, it's just civilians. And the first shots, they had a tendency, the first shots come their way, they're not getting paid for this. They're out of there. And they said they had a problem with the porters, not the scouts. Now, Solomon Island scouts were some tough guys. In fact, they would get mad at the Americans for not wanting to fight and running, and I won't say running, but didn't want to get into it. And they said the Americans make too much noise.
Yeah. These
are just porters, just normal guys from the village. Here, grab this box, this water can, help us take it up the hill. It's like, we're not getting paid for this. We're out of here, man. Like I said. So they had some issues. So that was the supplies they were dealing with. Sorry, my little mic fell off.
No, you're good.
So we'll go to the next one. I'm just calling some time. We'll keep rocking. So this is actual foxhole. Now I said foxhole. Some people get upset when I say foxhole.
It's a fighting hole.
In the Marine Corps, we call them fighting positions, and you never call it a foxhole. The reason I call it a foxhole is because in World War II, they called them foxholes. So I'm being historically correct.
Yeah, I just recently, I recently came across, just within the past few days, I was doing some research and was looking for some original content, like films and stuff like that. And a Marine Corps film, in the film, they use the term foxhole when they're describing these positions.
Yeah. Some people get all out of whack. Oh my God, that's no. And also too, the Marines in War II, a lot of them call themselves soldiers. A lot of times, they sort of blow people's mind. Even Puller said that, in the writings, because that's where they said it. You don't believe me? Read the writings of Puller, Vandergrift, Twining, Whaling. They all mention it, especially in World War I. Anyway, this is a foxhole, original foxhole, and the foxholes are well preserved there because it looks like it's coral. I always call it's coral. Some people say it's some type of volcanic magma or whatever, but they call it coral. I call it coral. I don't care. I know that a round lands on that, it turns into like mini bits of shrapnel. But they're very well preserved. And these are some of the ones, the Marine foxholes on Hill 55, that was the front line. And this was the kickoff point. But this is, you can set in these foxholes today and just look and see what they see. All right. So we're getting to the actual attack. So the plan was for reduction of the galloping horse. So I guess all viewers, if you want to just turn upside down, you can see a galloping horse there. Can you see the galloping horse, JD?
Yeah. You see where is it 55? Is that the back leg there?
Yeah, and the very bottom left is a head.
Yeah.
And it looks like a horse, like galloping, and tails there, and it does look like one. They call Hill 53 the head, so you can see the head, Hill 53. And what the plan was, a massive aerial and artillery bombardment, then very early in the morning, followed by, for 30 minutes, then followed by an assault by 2 battalions. The 1st battalion, the 27th regiment, was going to go to the right-hand side, which is my left on the map. So I'm pointing. So they were going to go and take Hill 57. the Marines were there. Some of the 8th Marines would go in and do blocking positions on the gullies. And then the main assault was going to be led by the 3rd Battalion of the 27th. And they were going to go from the Marine positions on Hill 55, 54, and push off, attack 52, then push all the way to the head and hit to Hill 53. They expected to do it in 2 days. The 2nd Battalion was at the base of Hill 55, ready to come in. And then the 161st, which was the additional battalion of the 25th National Guard. I called them the red-headed stepchildren of the division because they were National Guard. The regulars kind of like didn't treat them that well.
They were originally Illinois.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, it comes from when the divisions had 4 regiments, and then when the war started, they broke them down to 3. So that's when you had all these spare regiments flying around.
Okay.
And then the 25th actually broke in from the Hawaiian division, broke into 24th and 25th division. Okay. So the 161st was Division Reserve. I think 1 battalion was assisting, but yeah, the other 2 battalions were in reserve. So that was the plan. So that was going to kick off on the 10th of January. Now, the battalion commander of the 3rd Battalion, his surname was Bush, Lieutenant Colonel Bush. Guess what his first name was? Just take a running guess.
I don't want to guess.
Yeah. So Lieutenant Colonel George Bush,
not
the same one.
Nice.
It's George E. Bush, not W. So George Bush led that battalion. So what's the next slide? Okay. Yeah, well, TV, I love this photo. This was taken from a film we got out of New Zealand archives. And this is the actual 27th Regiment on the day. The whole series, it's good, small footage. It's about 4 minutes of footage. And these are stills from the footage. But I love this photo because, so the guy with a Thompson, he's in I've worked out he's in a mortar section.
Okay.
Because he's got binoculars and he's got a mortar sight in that little box. That's a mortar sight.
Okay.
He goes on a mortar. And so he was a part of a mortar team. And you can see the grass there and he's running through it and how barren it was. So this was actually on the day from the 27th. I don't know which battalion, but you could see the top of it. He's sweaty too. It's a great photo. I love it. So the attack started. Six artillery battalions kicked off. They fired 6,000 rounds in 30 minutes.
Oh my gosh.
Around a water hole, and they just smashed that area. And this is a cool point here. There was 12 P-39 fighter bombers and 12 SBD dive bombers. Each one of the P-39s carried a single 500-pound bomb. Each one of the SBDs carried 325-pound depth charges. There was no submarines up there, but they're depth charges. And they use them quite often. They put point contact fuses in these depth charges. Not a lot of shrapnel, but imagine a 325-pound high explosive landing near you.
Well, you say no shrapnel. You say no shrapnel, but landing up there in all that coral. I mean, it's going to be nasty.
Yeah. So if you drop one of them, it definitely shake you up.
Yeah.
So they dropped a number of those on. In fact, in 2019, I think we found one, I didn't find one. There was one found in the water hole, unexploded. And the guys had to go there and clear it out, the depth charge. And it throws people off when you say they're dropping depth charges on people.
Interesting.
Anyway, they dropped all that. The attack kicked off. The attack went quite well. This is another still from that photo. Once again, the guys are waiting. You got the water cans there, and they've got their light packs on. They learned a lesson though, that especially new units on the Guadalcanal, they'd go into combat with heavy packs and stuff, and they learned a lesson because heat casualties kicked their butt real quick. So we'll go to the next one. Yeah, so you get another issue. Any wounded here, they have to be evacuated by hand.
Oh my gosh.
So that's another major issue, trying to get these guys out. And keep going, JD. Or they had these first aid posts set up. These are 2 guys that had got hit by grenades, apparently.
Mm.
They're patching them up. These are just probably a battalion command post, or I keep saying command post, first aid post. Guy's patching his hand up. Now, the attack kicked off. The first battalion took Hill 57 quite quickly. That was to the right. Now, the main attack with Bush's battalion, the third battalion. This is their view they had. So this is the kickoff. I took this photo from Hill 54. That hill in the far distance is Hill 52. That was where the main the first Japanese resistance was. So this is the view the Americans had.
Mm.
This terrain hadn't changed. This is what they seen on the day. What you're looking at now in this photo is what they seen in January 43.
Wow.
So tack up that bowling alley, basically. How are you going to do that? So he decided 2 companies attack, one to the left and one to the right. And if you remember that photo we showed you when it goes straight down, you can't flank too much. So you got to really go to the left. So there's a little hill to the left called 51. So they took that quite quickly. There was no Japanese there. And then they formed a base of fire on Hill 51 and started shooting on 52. So at one point, the platoon actually made it halfway up there. And the platoon commander was wounded. Bad communication. It's happened as he's top of attacks. Bad communication. Battalion commander said, pull back. But if they were pushed through, they probably took it. Anyway, pull back. They were taking a lot of casualties, and they said, and the heat started really kicking their butt now. They were starting taking a lot of heat casualties. And they said, well, how are we going to crack this nut? So what we'll do is we'll drop a lot of RD on it and more arrow bombs and some more depth charges. Well, we got them. So they pulled back. And this is a very interesting point here. How are we going to mark it? Let's mark it with smoke. Good idea. Call up an RD fire mission. One single round of smoke. As soon as the smoke hits, air can drop it on them. They drop some HEs on it to start with.
Okay.
As soon as the smoke hits, one single round of smoke, the air can come down and drop the payloads. Boom. Fired out. Short round, 200 yards short from the battalion command post. First thing battalion commander did, he told his 81s, start laying them as much smoke you can on Hill 52 right now, because we're about to get hit by some arrow bombs. But luckily, the pilots had already recognized, okay, that's not Hill 52.
Wow.
But they dropped a series of depth charges. They did quite well. They dropped 6 depth charges in a row. Bang, 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 bang. 2 didn't explode, but 4 did. Right on the reverse slope of 52. So the Japanese in the Guadalcanal campaign would put their positions on the reverse slope. So the back slope, about 10 yards down, 10 meters down, depends. So that way you couldn't engage them with direct fire. The only way you can engage these guys, they couldn't engage you, but they didn't care. That means you had to come over, silhouette yourself at the top, right? Then cop a full blast to point blank range. But you couldn't get any support. And that's a hard one to crack.
Yeah.
When experts at that. And you've seen it when we were up there.
Yeah, when we roll our episode on the Gifu, which is going to be Sunday or Wednesday, there's a spot that we were at on the Gifu that really illustrates that well, where we're in a Japanese fighting position, and you can see like what it would have looked like for an American popping over the edge, and just what they were up against.
Yeah, not good. One thing, Japanese were great at, especially this. Now, this is a Japanese same view. So you get Americans attacking you, that you can say, come on.
Yeah.
Not too many places. There are some low parts in the ground. And I've walked it from both sides of trying to find cover, but there's not much cover there. And at the same time, you're attacking midday, and that sun it's hard to describe. There's no shade there. It's killing you. I actually found back part of a jawbone down at the base of that. Didn't have any teeth in it. Wow. It was given to the Japanese consulate. We was Japanese.
You're talking about how the heat can affect them physically. How much water are these guys coming up with?
Good segue. So 1 canteen of water. So 1 canteen of water. That's it. So how much is a World War II canteen, JD? How much water? A quart?
Is it 16 ounces?
A quart.
Quart? Yeah. Okay.
Go on, comment. Someone maybe comment. It's a quart. Not much.
No.
When I did my video, if you go to my channel, I did a video on the thin red line in Galloping and Charles Davis Medal of Honor. So I decided I would take me 1 quart. I don't know why I was thinking that. And toward the end of that, you'll see I'm suffering.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know one was shooting at me, but anyway. Yeah, so they had an issue of getting that supply up. One, you had to hand carry it. And then the water was trying to get to them. But it's like anything in these type of situations. You might have a lot in the rear, but when it goes all advances up, everyone wants to take a little bit out. Give me some of that water. Give me some of that water. Give me some of that water. By the time it gets to the front line, there's no more water left. They couldn't get them up by Jeep. So they're having some issues, serious issues. And they started suffering, even about late afternoon, they started suffering from heat casualties. Now, one company was down to 1/3 from heat casualties. So this is a great I guess you could say a learning experience to study about how lack of water will stop a unit in its tracks in an attack. So they advanced and they finally took Hill 52. And by that stage, it was getting late in the day. They said, look, we've basically had it. We run out of water. We've got casualties. We're on 52. We've done quite well. So the next day, we'll get replenished and we'll continue our assault on the 11th. So the 11th came around. I think another slide there. That just shows you some of the terrain they're advancing across. So the 11th came around. They commenced their attack. Go back one, JD.
Oh, sorry.
Yep. So they commenced their attack on the 11th. Then they were trying to get to Sims Ridge or Hill 53 and 32 ounces quart. Good. Thank you, Professor Watt. I just seen it pop up there. Still in here. It's not enough.
Yeah.
So they tried. They didn't get any water resupply that night.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. So that next day, they pushed up. They were pushing toward the next set of ridges, with lack of water, heat casualties. The mortar machine gun fire was building up, and they gained a little bit the next day on the 11th. But then at that stage, the regimental commander, who's regimental commander? I think it's McCullough. Yeah. McCullough, the regimental commander, said, no, stop. We're going to bring in the 2nd Battalion for the 12th. So the morning of the 12th kicked off. Another artillery bombardment. This is the 12th. They'd made it up to Sims Ridge. Exton's Ridge.
Mm-hmm. I think I got another. Whoop.
Go back. Just go back to the map. So they'd made it up to Exton's Ridge because the Japanese were there. It had a little light resistance and they pulled back. So they had Exton's Ridge, which is on the right-hand side of Sims Ridge, the final ridge they needed to go to. But then they started getting a lot of machine gun and mortar fire, and there was reverse slope positions. They had one on the west side of Sims Ridge. They couldn't crack. They couldn't get to it. So there was a guy called Charles Davis. So the next photo. Charles Davis was the executive officer of the 2nd Battalion. All right. So the 2nd Battalion was under a guy called Herbert Mitchell. And Mitchell basically had Davis with him in the command post. It was almost like you think of American football game. We got this, guy on the bench going, I want to get in the game. Come on, coach, put me in, coach. He was bugging the hell out of the battalion commander. And the battalion commander, he goes, look, and I think a report come back that the communications was dropping down. He goes, I'll run a message up for you, but I'll come back. And I think he said, just go ahead, Davis, go up there. Davis went up, never came back. He stayed up there and he goes, well, I'm in the fight now. I'll just stay here. Anyway, that reverse slope bunker was a cluster of 3 mutually supporting log bunkers.
Okay.
And they were reverse slope. They couldn't engage them unless you go over the slope or come around the west flank to see it point blank. So him, a captain, and a lieutenant named Sims crawled to the east side. There's a coral ledge on the east side. They got within 50 yards to try to look over to see if they could pinpoint. So they're coming to the right-hand side from the right. That's the east. Just try to pinpoint this cluster. Well, they get there, and Sims raises up, and he cops a blast of machine gun face in his face and chest and kills him. That's why it's called Sims Ridge. Davis pulls back with the captain, then he gives his report to the company commander, moves back up, started calling 81 millimeter artillery or mortar rounds within 50, 60 yards. So Davis on the other side. This is on the 12th. So nighttime comes, he moves back. By that stage, if you look at the top, F Company had moved halfway up Sims Ridge and had a position there. Go to my overall photo. Yeah, I love this photo.
Yeah.
So they didn't get any water either. So the morning of the 13th popped up. The plan was, so here you're looking at the whole battlefield. On the right-hand side is Sims Ridge. So they put their heavy machine guns and some light mortars. They were going to throw some covering fire. F Company was halfway up Sims Ridge with E Company. So what F Company was going to do was break off to the right, go west, and move through the jungle to try to flank it.
This is the blue arrow that we're looking at, right?
Yep, the bottom blue. So go to the next slide. Yeah, there we go. So F Company, the plan was for them to flank it, to move around, to take the horse's head, which is Hill 53. G Company was going to remain on Sims Ridge. And then E Company, with the battalion commander, with Mitchell leading them from the front, was going to move up and go underneath the ledge. If you go to this day, there's a nice coral ledge. And that's on the other side of this pillbox cluster, which is that red circle. What Davis was going to do, because he knew where it was. Earlier in the day, there were 6 men from that company had moved up to try to find this, and 2 of them were killed. So Davis was going to take the remaining 4, because they knew where that bunker was. They were going to crawl within 10 meters of that bunker complex. There, they were supposed to distract the bunker by throwing a series of grenades, right? Once they distracted it, Davis was going to blow a whistle.
Mm-hmm.
That was going to be the cue for Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell and the rest of E Company to come up and over and take the pillboxes from the top, right, where Davis and the men had their attention. So that was the plan. So Davis and 4 others crawled up. They got within 10 meters. Japanese seen them, threw 2 hand grenades, fired a burst machine gun. 2 hand grenades did not explode. They threw 8 hand grenades, the Americans did. Once they exploded, instead of distracting, Davis goes, "Follow me." So they jumped up, run to the bunkers. Davis fired. He fired 1 round from his M1 Garand. It had a stoppage. He transitioned to his left hand, pulled out his .45 and started pumping rounds into the bunker. The other guys started pumping rounds into the bunkers. A couple of Japanese tried to flee. They cut them down. And by that stage, all this action, they're silhouetted on top. Almost the whole division could see them because they're at the top of the hill. Collins was on Hill 52.
Oh, wow.
He was that close. He was with Martin Clemens. So I've got Martin Clemens' direct testimony about he was there with him, with Clemens. But he watched it all. They watched it all.
Oh, my gosh.
Happening. So it's silhouetted. And obviously, whoever that guy is, find me who that guy is. But anyway, then when they were taking them out, rest of E Company come over. They're all motivated in. The blood was up, so they've charged up the rest of the hill. By the time F Company had swept through the jungle, and they just drove straight up the ridge and took the rest of Hill 53.
Wow.
And that was the end of the Galloping Horse fight. So if you go to the next slide. Now, this is the position that Davis and his men saw. This is 10 yards from the Japanese bunker complex.
That's incredible.
I'll tell you a more incredible thing. In 2009, the first time I seen it, a lot of people were saying, "Oh, it's on the other side." And the tour guides will take people to the other side. And this is where the Davis was. And after my reading and research, I'm like, no, Davis is on the west side. You've got it all wrong. So I've recreated what Davis and his men did. So I thought, well, I'm reading it, 10 yards, and I walked. You could see the bunker complex. There's 3 big holes there.
Yeah.
I walked down 10 yards, and they said he was on this little ledge. And I'm like, oh, there's a ledge. Oh, wow, great. This is great. So I'm squatting down, taking photos, and looking. And then I'm looking to my far right, and there's rusty grenade pull pins
Oh
laying
my
on the ground.
gosh.
And I'm thinking, no,
No way.
it can't be. And then I started thinking, Guadalcanal was a training base after the fight campaign in '44. But I've got all the training maps and range maps. That was firing ranges, or bombing ranges. There was no like grade ranges or anything there. There was no other fighting there before or after. I'm thinking, are these actually Davis and his men's pool rings?
Oh my gosh.
Something tells me they're no longer there today. But who's to say? But that was just it was an unreal moment.
Oh, that's incredible.
To go back to that sorry, I'm cautious of time. Yeah, so that was the view they had. And I think the next slide actually shows, and this is what's so amazing. That's the actual bunkers. There were underground bunkers. They dug a hole and they put coconut logs over the top, and some more rocks and things on it. So that was the Japanese bunkers. This is what's so freaking amazing. In April, 3 months after the fight, a Life magazine photographer spoke to Major Davis at the time.
Yeah.
He says, look, you're still on the island. Can you recreate your Medal of Honor action? And I'll take a series of photos. These are live photos in April. And that's Davis and the same 4 men recreating on location their Medal of Honor actions. So there they are. There's the bunkers. You can see Savo Island.
Savo Island. Yeah, I was getting ready to mention that.
Yeah, you can see him attacking on the left hand, or the left of the west side of the ridge. Him and his 4 men. There's Davis' transition to his M1. He's got his pistol out, and those are the remnants of the Japanese bunkers.
Had you seen these photos yet when you had gone up there that time?
No. This was a guy named Peter sent them to me earlier, or probably about mid last year, in August of last year. And I thought, because he was going through the live files. And there's him and Davis is on the far left, and the rest of the guys. And now the rest of the guys are decorated too. And I think there's a newspaper article that says what they won. Yeah.
Yeah, there's
maybe you can post that later and it shows their names and stuff. One guy's cool.
Distinguished Service Cross, Silver Star, another Silver Star. Yeah.
Yeah, one guy's got an M1, got a 03 Springfield, which is another myth. All the Army had all M1s and the Marines all had 03s, which is primarily that's true, but that's not entirely true. It's not that cut and dry. Yeah. This is the last thing the Japanese soldier probably seen. That was, it's great looking at the evidence too, because I've read accounts where one account in one Army history says he threw his M1 to the ground, which they don't throw guns down. And then you read another account, he just had it in his hand. Well, this right here, if he's recreating his Medal of Honor incident, he's got his M1 in his hand. I mean, that generally tells you probably he still had it. I don't know. But yeah, that 45 barrel looks pretty big there.
Yes, it does.
It's like cannon looking at you. Yeah, that's an excellent photo. I can't remember too many Medal of Honors recipients who are recreating their Medal of Honor on location. We have a series of photos for.
Yeah, that's absolutely incredible.
Now, these 2 guys, and I'll mention them here toward the end. They never get mentioned. At the same time that the 27th Regiment was taken out, the Galloping Horse, as I mentioned earlier, the 35th, 2 battalions of the 35th were taken out, the Seahorse. He was 43 and 44. These 2 guys here were part of the M Company, which was the machine gun company, the weapons company, of the 3rd Battalion of the 35th. So they led the charge. So they're coming through this thick jungle. These 2 guys, guy on the right is Sergeant Fournier, or Fournier, is some people like to call it. Now, how would you pronounce his surname? You pronounce it Fournier, wouldn't you?
I'd say Fournier, but
Fournier.
One of the few things that I do well is mispronounce names. So who knows? Yeah.
I'm sorry if we've mispronounced, but it's Sergeant William Fournier, I'll say. The guy on the left is they call it Spec 5. I don't know if maybe it's a buck sergeant. I'm not too familiar with it. It's either a corporal or sergeant. I think it's a sergeant. He was like 47 years old, and that's Lewis Hall. He's on the left-hand side. Both machine gunners. Guy on the right, Fournier, was a section commander for machine guns. So they had the M1919 medium machine gun because of the 1917 water coolers too heavy to take through the jungle.
Yeah.
They're crossing one of the forts in the Tanakau in that thick ravines. So they assigned these guys on a small knoll to guard the right flank, right, a danger area, a danger area where the rest of them are crossing up to go up. They didn't put enough men with them. They put some riflemen. They had 2 machine guns. They put them to guard that flank. Colonel Oka, which is the regimental commander of the 124th, his headquarters are very near there. Anyway, the Japanese seen them. They started rushing the Americans. So all of a sudden, the Americans' whole battalion's flank was in danger. Japanese took out 1 machine gun very quickly, took out the other crew. So there was only 1 gun there. The riflemen kind of got out of there a bit. They moved back. So these guys seen this 1 machine gun. They seen the Japanese coming in. The flank of the company was about to get hit. So what these guys did, Fournier ran up and grabbed the machine gun tripod. Their knoll was so steep in the ravine, they couldn't, using the tripod, they couldn't depress the barrel down low enough to engage the Japanese. So what Fournier did, he threw the bipod on his back like spread eagle, leaned forward, Hall manipulated the trigger. And by doing that, Fournier was like a mobile tripod, and they engaged the Japanese.
Oh my gosh.
Both was mortally wounded. I think Fournier actually lived another day, but they were mortally wounded, and they died there.
Oh my gosh.
Well, they both were killed, and they're both received posthumously the Medal of Honor. Wow. What's amazing, in the Guadalcanal campaign, there were something like 21 Medal of Honors. I don't say given, awarded.
Yeah.
There were, recipients. But of the 5 Medal of Honors on land, enlisted Medal of Honors, all were machine gunners. It shows you the defensive nature that the Americans were fighting. Everyone a machine gunner. You had Barcelona, which everyone knows, and they think Barcelona fought everywhere on Guadalcanal. Casametto, Mitch Page, and Fournier and Hall.
Yeah.
There's 5 of them.
And if I'm the Japanese and I've got 10 guys firing at me with 03 Springfields and 1 guy firing it with a machine gun, I'm going to be concentrating all my guys on the guy with the machine gun.
Yeah.
Trying to take him out. Wow.
Yeah. That's what they teach you. Machine gunner, as soon as you open up, you're going to cop all the rounds.
Incredible.
So the outcomes of this battle, basically, the Japanese, you can never get accurate Japanese accounts. I mean, it's sometimes inflated on both sides, but it's estimated about 170 Japanese died just on the galloping horse. I mean, in casualties, it's not great. 1 casualty is bad, but I never say only 1 death or 2 deaths. That's not too cool. But I think the 30. I've got this written down, like all the Marine ones I know off the top of my head. So 31. They had 31 killed in action, the Americans, and about 53 wounded in actions. But 1/3, especially 1/3 of the 3rd Battalion, suffered from heat casualties. So what's 1/3 of the battalion gone?
Yeah, just from heat-related
casualties. So it's a great study in what a lack of water would do to a company in the attack. Or
I believe it. We talk about the physical effects of not having water. I mean, there's mental effects to that as well. I mean, again, I keep drawing back to just my own personal experience there. And I think I was putting down about 1.5 liters or 2 liters of water a day and was still just roasting. And it felt like it was roasting my brain too. In the video, talking about Douglas Monroe. I'm talking Douglas Monroe, and then in the footage that I have, all of a sudden I start calling him Charles Monroe.
Yeah.
I got another video that's going to be coming out Sunday. I start talking about the Battle of Henderson Creek. It's just like my brain just got cooked out there, and I was like, "What in the world?" Because we'd spent the whole week talking about Henderson Field, and then in the middle of it, I go right back to saying Henderson Field. So it has a physical effect and it has a mental effect. Now we've had quite a few. Huh?
You probably got heaps of comments. It's not a creek. It's not a creek.
Oh well, no, I cut that out. There's
Okay.
there's no way I was going to put that in there.
But the sorry, just one bit.
Sure.
And then between the seahorse and the galloping horse, had cut the supply line off, and then that closed the that isolated the Gifu. And then the 25th kept attacking after that a few days. On the 13th, the Second Marine Division had pushed off, and then they did their flanking assault on Kokumbona. At that stage, the Japanese on the 15th and 16th started drawing back. I'd say on the 17th, actually 16th, 17th. That's when Hayataki learned the evacuation, so they started pulling back that line.
Gotcha.
And it was a race then to try to smash them. But then the Gifu, I think in the 22nd, 23rd, it was finally reduced. They killed the Japanese there.
Cool. Now we've been getting several comments or questions. You can't talk about this and not address the thin red line.
I was waiting for that.
Yeah. So I mean, just from what I saw, from watching Thin Red Line and then walking the ground myself, the terrain looks good to me in Thin Red Line. What is your assessment of the movie as far as how well it portrays the fighting on Galloping Horse Ridge?
And once again, that's an episode by itself, but I'll just skim the waves on it. Terrain wise, you got to remember parts of it were actually filmed on Guadalcanal. I mean, you'll see the scene where they're walking up a ridge. You see Savo Island in their background, and the locals. Get the local villages and stuff. I spoke to people who are in the movie. The locals. They filmed it in a village, and I know where the village is. So that was great there. And then they filmed it in northern New South Wales and Queensland. So that's why the terrain is pretty spot on. If you look at the hills of Barron at Kunai grass top, and they're charging, and I didn't mind those scenes. They're quite good. I mean, once again with the movie, and the uniforms are great. The weapons were pretty much spot on. I mean, there's still a bit of a jury's still out about the M1 carbines on Guadalcanal. I have found limited evidence. Initially, I used to say there was none involved in the campaign by the Army, but I think I've seen one photo now with a M1, and then I know there's been a couple of M1 magazines found, and they're not part of the training later in an area on Hill 27 in Foxholes, so I think if there were M1 carbines there, they were very limited. You wouldn't see them in infantry battalions, because any photo you see on Guadalcanal, you never find any M1 carbines. So, but the uniforms and were spot on. I tell you, the Japanese is probably the best depiction of Japanese I've ever seen in, I think, any movie.
Oh,
I mean, look at their uniforms, look at how the camouflage is, look at their movements, and they're very good to how they portray the Japanese. Now, I found the movie very deep in places. I mean, it came out around roughly, I think, right after Saving Private Ryan.
Soon after Saving Private Ryan, yeah.
Yeah, people were expecting the same. Then you have Terrence Malick, which was the director, I forget which one.
He was director, yeah.
Director, so, obviously he's thinking not big picture, but real deep. I found it deep, and, it just goes off sometimes and just talks about, there's a deep meanings of man versus the jungle versus land, and it's all kind of weird stuff, and not weird, but different than movies. So
yeah,
it's either one of the movies you generally like or dislike. But generally, the terrain, the weapons, and the other things. I mean, it betrayed. Remember the movie was based on the book, The Thin Red Line. Yeah. James Jones fought in the 2nd Battalion. He was wounded up on Galloping Horse Ridge. He was shot. Okay. He hit shrapnel on the leg. I mean, I've got all his records and things. And he's written that. It's a fiction book based on nonfiction. Because, for example, in his book, he mentions the dancing elephant, that's a galloping horse. Mm. He's just changed names. The people are the same. He's got a battalion commander that's pushing him. He's got a company commander is trying to defend him. But in reality, Mitchell, the battalion commander, led from the front. In the movie, Nick noted, because there's 2 movies, by the way. I don't know if there was 2 movies. One made in the 60s.
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
Yeah. But in the modern version, the 1990s movies, Nick Nolte's in the rear.
Okay.
But I mean, little things in the movie, like, Nick Nolte's got his Lieutenant Colonel epaulets flipped over. He's hiding them. Little things like that. Grenades are yellow. I mean, whoever the advisors, technical advisors, pretty good.
Interesting. So here's just a general Guadalcanal question. While we've got your brain here, we're going to pick it. Do you guys know anything about an attack or an explosion at a supply base at Guadalcanal? Grandfather's uncle was there when it happened.
Yeah, he's probably talking about 1943. Is it June or July? A place called Hell's Point had a giant fire and explosion. This was after the campaign. I mean, they were still running air missions, obviously, out of Guadalcanal, but they had a big fire there. It's only one person that died, but there's huge area. Hell's Point is where Alligator Creek is, and to this day, that's where the EOD bomb, the nation's bomb team, is. That's where they get rid of. And that during the time of the even campaign, that's where all the unexploded ordnance and stuff was stored, and ordnance was stored. So they had a giant fire there. I think mid 43, and I'd say that's it. That was the big one. I mean, there's some good photos of it. It's just huge. But luckily, a lot of guys had to swim the Elu River to get across, but in Burns, but there's only one died, unfortunately. But I'd say that's it.
Okay. Are you aware of any stories of an American Red Cross plane getting shot down over Guadalcanal?
Not a Red Cross plane. I'm not aware of that. The only planes could be not Red Cross, but they were medical planes. I mean, they had R4Ds, which is the Navy Marine designation for the C-47. So they'd fly in after like late August. They started flying them in, flying limited supplies in, and more importantly, taking the wounded out to fly them to New Caledonia. So there were medical flights. So that could be a Red Cross flight, and there were a few of them I wouldn't say shot down. I know a few crashed. I'm not aware of any shot down. It possibly could be, but there's no Red Cross planes that I'm aware of. I don't think they even flew Red Cross planes. Probably a medical plane that you're referring to.
Okay. Just a few more questions, and then we won't take up any more of your time. So we were talking Thin Red Line. So Thin Red Line has depicted Galloping Horse. You've had the Pacific series that does Alligator Creek and Henderson Field. If somebody came to you and said, "Hey, can you generate an idea for us to do a movie on something in the Guadalcanal campaign?" What are you picking?
Interesting one. Something that hadn't been done already, obviously. I've done, Galloping Horse. I've done Alligator Creek.
Or
you get on Bloody Ridge. I mean, I'm talking about land. I'm a land guy.
Yeah.
I'm a land guy. I mean, I'm not a sea and air guy. I mean, I know little bits about it, but I can't deep dive. There's people that I can recommend it in books that can really deep dive into the naval campaign. So all my focus will be on the land. I mean, I could think of some naval ones like the big Ballroom Brawl and the Night of the Battleships. Not Night of the Battleships, but the November battle.
Mm-hmm.
The naval battle would be a good one. That's this crazy one. But I think Bloody Ridge, Redson's Ridge. I mean, it's probably the most famous one, and it shows a lot of drama in it and action. Yeah, for that. And I'd like to see the 27th of September, the Little Dunkirk action, but it's the real only American defeat, so it probably wouldn't go over well. They'd have to rejig it to make it a win or something. I don't know, but that's a good action.
I thought the same thing. I thought something on the 1st Raider Battalion, maybe landing at Tulagi, starting off, and then finishing up, on Battle of Bloody Ridge.
The long patrol for the 2nd Raiders would actually be pretty good, because that's
another one that I thought of.
Forces one. I mean, that was probably one of the first special forces missions in World War II for the Americans on that long patrol.
Yeah. So here's one more question. Maybe I'll kind of generalize this a little bit more. Are there a lot of Japanese accounts that come out of Guadalcanal?
Not a lot, unfortunately. In my book, what I try to do is try to tell it from both sides. I like to get 50-50, but I've got about 1/3 Japanese first-hand accounts. So ladies from Japanese records, and I've been helped by a Japanese historian. But yeah, a lot of them, especially toward the end, you get a lot of accounts, and they're not. Some are very like fanatical thinking, but a lot of them are pretty miserable to read. You actually feel sorry for these guys, even though saying feel sorry for Japanese, but just they're starving, and while they're writing their poetry, like one guy says, I bear the shame of my parents seeing my face like this because I don't even recognize myself. I'm starving to death. And some of them actually was saying, I didn't expect to lose. We come all the way down here to lose. We don't lose and things like that. But there are Japanese, I forgot his name actually. He was actually in the Gifu. And I mean, I see the question there, I've come across a lot of accounts of Japanese heroic actions. They just don't get published as much as the Americans ones. And some of the Americans talk about some of these Japanese. I mean, one thing you won't find about American combat vet who fought on the front line against these guys to saying they wasn't brave.
Yeah.
In fact, they were too brave. They were too brave for their own good. You'd have to kill them all. That's what one Marine vet actually told me. He said, you've just got to kill every one of these guys.
I've never interviewed
them, but you got to kill them all.
Yeah, I've never interviewed a Pacific War veteran who just brushed off the Japanese. I mean, they all of them talk about how tough they were and how brutal the fighting was. All right, so last one, then I'll let you go. Tell us about this book that we can be expecting later in the year.
Okay. It's not up for, you can't order it yet. I mean, I've actually got to get it to the publisher this month.
Okay.
So it should be, it's published by Casemate Publishing. So it's going to be published in the United States and the UK. They have a wide distribution. So if you're in Australia and you could be on the normal things like Amazon and probably any place you get normal books or regular books. Probably October when it's out in the US. I don't know when the pre-orders come in, but the book will basically focus on the battles around the Point Cruz to Matanical area. I've got 104, some of them are right behind me, Guadalcanal books. There's a lot more written out there, but there's none that ever goes into detail about these fights. I mean, obviously, some of the great ones overall, like Richard Frank and Sam Griffin's book, go good overall. The two I'd recommend for the overall version of the campaign. They hit it at a strategic and operational level. I mean, they talk about it, but they don't really go into detail. And especially, no one really goes into detail about the November to January fights around that area.
Yeah.
And there's some severe fighting. I mean, like I said earlier, more casualties in November. And the impact that had for the rest of the campaign. Because my argument is the mouth of Matanical, the most strategic point of that whole place. And both commanders knew it at the time. And everything was going to that mouth of Matanical. Who owned the Matanical basically controlled Henderson Field. But that's why I really wanted to delve deep into it. I mean, the thing that really, I see it all the time, and it used to really kind of bug me. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was in a hotel where all the main tourist hotels in Guadalcanal are located right in the Point Cruz area. There's around 80 Americans still there missing. People don't even know it. They're right underneath their feet. When I worked as a policeman in my headquarters, I mean, I've got most of those guys. I used to think about them every day, right underneath my office. I used to walk across them. We walked across them. I told you when we were there. Yeah. And the amount of fighting was in that small area. But when these especially American tour groups, when they go over there, they get there. And I was in a hotel one time, and I heard a guy say, there's a group there. And I heard him ask the tour leader, he goes, are we going to stay here today around and talk about the Matanical in this area? He goes, nothing really happened much around here. We're going to Bloody Ridge. I'm going,
gosh.
I go, what? I said, and I looked up, I said, I'm looking at where 3 Medal of Honors were earned, right? Where 4 battles were fought, hundreds of men died, right? And a lot of them are still underneath us right now. But I kept seeing it over and over and over again. And in my book, I talk about the reasons why I think that is.
Yeah.
But and I thought, well, of all the books that have been written, this is the real missing point. And then another thing that came out from that when I started writing a book was that in my Facebook site, because I'm very active on that, and I help out a lot of veterans families, and they were saying to me, my uncle or my grandfather, my dad was in the 182nd Regiment or the 164th or the 8th Marines or the 2nd Marines. And I can't find anything written about them in all these Guadalcanal books.
Yeah.
And that started coming out. And I go, well, yeah, you're right. No one really goes into detail about their fights, which are pretty tough and pretty hard. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of people don't remember them, because they don't want to remember. There was nothing, no glory, no dramatic stands or Alligator Creeks or Bloody Ridge top stands on the Matanical and Point Cruz. That was just bloody, hard, long slog fighting. A lot of deaths, a lot of fighting, very important fighting. So yeah, I thought, well, that was what I'll address. And the whole mopping up myth came out from it too. And I go, this is bullshit.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll try it again.
No, I think it's great that you're doing it. Cause like I said, just from, I obviously don't have the depth of knowledge that you do, but when you talk Guadalcanal, there's Alligator Creek, isolated action there. There's Bloody Ridge, there's, Gifu and Galloping Horse. But that stuff around the Matanical sees the most sustained combat throughout the whole entire campaign. It's like there's just constant fighting that's going on right there.
There's a
so
reason.
yeah, I'm super glad that you're tackling that. Is there a title for the book yet?
Yeah, I was about to say, because you mentioned the longest fight. So the title will be Guadalcanal's Longest Fight, the pivotal battles of the Point Cruz line.
Awesome.
Or sorry, Matanical front.
Yeah.
What am I saying? Yeah, so it's Guadalcanal's Longest Fight, the pivotal battles of the Matanical front. And that's what they call it, the Matanical front. That's what they refer to it as. And it's the longest fight of Guadalcanal. And people don't realize that. It was the side of the longest and most sustained. So from August to January, they were just constant fighting in that area. Like I said, Bloody Ridge and Alligator Creek, very, very important battles. But in the scheme of things, they were small localized battles.
Yeah.
They never fought again on those grounds.
Right.
There's awesome. seven battles were fought over the Matanical, just 7. And it's not counting the amount of skirmishes and things like that. Anyway, when the book goes to pre-order, if you have me on again, I'll chat about the importance of that area and the different battles of the Matanical.
I was getting ready to say when that thing goes on pre-order, we'll definitely have you on just as soon as that happens. You've got some people already excited for this book. For
yes,
sure.
I feel your pain.
Yeah.
My daughters have a little section like that way down, and I let them keep.
Yours are at least on a shelf. Mine are stacked up by the bed and stacked up by my desk, and it's a mess. So, all right. Well, hey man, thanks for carving out some time and man, sharing all of your knowledge and your passion. It's super important and definitely helpful for people like me. And yeah, I've said it before and I'll say it again. I could have went to Guadalcanal by myself, and I could have pumped out a few mediocre videos, but you have definitely made that series. There's no way I could have done it, without you. I
enjoyed taking you and enjoyed your company.
Yeah.
I think you learned on the first day about wearing the little hats and blue jeans and stuff. It's quite funny. You got all these Australians sun hats and long sleeves, and there's JD with his ball cap, short sleeves, and blue jeans.
I was I walked in ready for Midwest humidity, not Guadalcanal equatorial humidity, but I learned quick.
No, I appreciate you having me on today, and I really, really enjoyed the talk. As you can probably see, I could chat all day about this. So, yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much.
No, my pleasure. And thanks again, JD.
All right. So that was a little bit on the fight at the Galloping Horse Ridge. And again, as I said at the beginning, seriously, after this ends, go and subscribe to Guadalcanal Walking the Battlefield on YouTube. There is so much good information on there, and Dave takes you to places that nobody else on YouTube is taking you, and teaching you things about the Guadalcanal campaign. And then also along with that, his Facebook page is incredible. He's incredibly active on it. One last thing that I'll say about Dave, just as a compliment, I know historians who research and get a hold of information and are, for lack of a better term, greedy with it. Dave is right up there as one of the most generous guys with the things that he knows. He's very active in the comments, very active on Facebook, and wants people to know these things. And when we were on the island, one of the things I took note of is the people who were on the island. So the Solomon Islanders who live there, he's sharing knowledge with them, saying, I'll send you pictures, I'll send you books, I'll send you this, I'll send you that, so that they can have ownership over the history on their island and pass it on and utilize it. So anyway, go out and follow his page and subscribe to his channel. You will definitely be glad that you did. With that, we got about 3 episodes left in the Guadalcanal series. So hope that people are enjoying it, and thanks for joining us this evening.